Today's top stories, January 18, 2021. The Health Department says it is seeking further study on the deaths in Norway linked to COVID-19 vaccine. The government maintains it is buying Sinovac at a fair price. The crash site of the Philippine Air Force chopper remains restricted, and the AFP vows to dismantle all communist front within the year. Good day, I am Rom Dulfo. Welcome to PNA Newsroom. Our top story, the Department of Health says they are still looking further into the deaths in Norway, which were reported to be caused by Pfizer's COVID-19 vaccine. Health Undersecretary Maria Rosario Vergeres says it will be evaluated by the Food and Drug Administration and will decide depending on their conclusion.
Pinag-aaralan maigi ng Norwegian authorities yung nangyari. Pangalawa, nandiyon na sila dun sa mga setting nila ng premise setting na unang-una binigay ang bakuna dito sa mga critically ill sa isang facility, no? And pangalawa, sinasabi nila that in a given time, they have reported 400 cases of deaths among this specific sector of the population. So parang sinasabi nila that this might just be coincidental. But still, they are not closing the issue. They would want to look into it further. Pero sa ngayon, sinasabi nila, they don't think it's related, no? Pfizer have to submit to the Philippine Food and Drug Administration a report regarding this matter. That's the time that the Food and Drug Administration can decide on the EUA of Pfizer here in the country.
Malacanang has rejected claims that the vaccine developed by China, called Sinovac, is priced at 3,600 pesos per dose. Presidential spokesperson Harry Roque clarified that the national government bought Sinovac vaccines at a BFF, or Best Friend Forever price. William Theo with more.
Presidential spokesperson Harry Roque reiterates that China's Sinovac vaccines was being offered to the government at a reasonable price. He said the price is not far from the offered price in Indonesia, which is about 650 pesos per dose. Roque reiterated that China was hesitant to announce the prices of their vaccines as they might be compared to prices in other countries. He also brushed aside the call of the senators to reconsider its decision to purchase Sinovac vaccines, as President Duterte already declared that he would take responsibility for the health and safety of all Filipinos. He said the government was not favoring any vaccine supplier, but it was just a matter of which vaccine brands come first. Vaccine czar Carlito Galvez Jr. earlier said the Philippines has secured 25 million doses of Sinovac vaccine, with the first 50,000 doses expected to arrive next month. Galvez said the prices of coronavirus vaccines circulating in various social media platforms and other publications are not the same as the government's negotiated prices under the COVAX facility. For the PNA Newsroom, I am William Theo.
The government's vaccine procurement initiatives are being lauded for prioritizing the less fortunate. Given the limited supply of vaccines, the DOH earlier said the vulnerable sectors of the population will be prioritized, and 60–70% of the population must be immunized to achieve herd immunity. The Catholic Bishops' Conference of the Philippines, or CBCP, expressed its support to the government efforts and urges the people to have themselves vaccinated. CBCP Chair Tuguegarao Archbishop Ricardo Bacay said the poor should be specially protected because their poverty makes them vulnerable to infection and severe disease. He said the COVID-19 vaccines will only be able to end the pandemic in our country if enough Filipinos are vaccinated. However, he said the group also recognizes that each individual person should be left free to decide to choose to be vaccinated or not according to his or her conscience, with full awareness of the obligation to protect oneself from being an instrument of contagion and the further spread of the virus. As the Senate continues its hearing on the national COVID-19 vaccination program, Senator Richard Gordon pointed out that implementing the universal healthcare law would ensure its speedy and organized rollout. Gordon says it would be easier to distribute the vaccine if they are registered with their primary care providers as mandated by the universal healthcare law. He says the Department of Health should undertake to contact private, province-wide and city-wide health care systems for the delivery of population-based health services as mandated by the UHC law. In this way, the government can also monitor if an individual has already been inoculated for COVID-19 vaccine. The Department of Science and Technology has developed a contactless attendance system device to minimize contact during this pandemic. Employees using the sensors-equipped system would only need to place a hand near the left sensor to select options displayed on the screen. The right sensor is used to confirm the selected option. After getting the temperature and answering health check questions, employees would have to scan a quick response code on their mobile phones for them to time in. The employees' log in and log out are integrated into their in-house human resource management information system. The device, excluding the monitor and CPU, only costs 7,000 pesos. Still to come, the crash site of the Philippine Air Force chopper remains restricted, and China assures funding for the country's infrastructure projects. More on these when the PNA Newsroom continues.
Sa matinding laban natin sa Coronavirus Disease 2019, sugpuin din natin ang pagkalat ng fake news. Huwag magbahagi ng impormasyon na hindi tiyak ang pinagmulan. I-check mabuti ang source ng balita. Kumuha lamang ng impormasyon mula sa mga official channel ng Department of Health. Huwag magpadala sa maling balita, basta't sama-sama at laging handa. Kaya natin to. Isang paalala mula sa DOH, PCOO, KBP at ng himpilang ito. Alamin kung paano ang tamang pagsusuot ng surgical mask. Una, hawakan ang mask sa strap at siguruhing natatakpan nito ang inyong bibig at ilong. Tandaan, ang may kulay na bahagi ng mask ang dapat nasa labas. Ito lamang ang tamang paraan ng pagsuot nito. Ihulma ang nose piece o maliit na metallic strip ayon sa hugis ng inyong ilong. Iwasan ang paghawak sa inyong ilong at bibig. Kung marumi na ang mask, hubarin ito gamit ang strap at itapon ito sa isang basurahan. Siguruhin ang maayos na paghuhugas ng kamay gamit ang sabon at tubig. Ang surgical mask ay dapat gamitin ng mga pasyenteng may sakit sa baga o mga taong mayroong ubo, sipon at lagnat, mga nag-aalaga sa mga may sakit, at mga healthcare at frontline workers. Maaari ring magsuot nito kung kayo ay pupunta sa matataong lugar. Basta't sama-sama at laging handa. Kaya natin to. Isang paalala mula sa DOH, PCOO, KBP at ng himpilang ito.
You're still watching PNA Newsroom. Thank you for joining us. Investigation continues on the crashed Bell utility helicopter of the Philippine Air Force. The incident occurred last Saturday afternoon in Malaybalay City in Bukidnon, leaving all 7 people aboard dead. Details from Marita Muahe.
The site where a UH-1H UE helicopter crashed on Saturday afternoon is still off limits to the public. This as a team from the Philippine Air Force continues to investigate the cause of the incident. Major Rodolfo Cordero Jr. of the Army's 4th Infantry Division said the wreckage of the helicopter that crashed in the mountainous village of Barangay Bulonay in Impasugong is now being guarded by soldiers from the 8th Infantry Battalion. The military helicopter was on its way to a remote Army patrol base in Impasugong near the Agusan del Sur boundary to bring provisions. He said the helicopter crashed probably due to a mechanical malfunction and not because of the weather condition. Those who died in the crash are Lieutenant Colonel Arnie Arroyo, Second Lieutenant Mark Anthony Kaabay, Sergeant Mervin Bersabe, Airman First Class Stephen Agarado, Sergeant Julius Salvado, Jerry Ayokdo, and Jamel Sugalang. Their bodies were recovered and brought to the 403rd Camp in Malaybalay City. Meanwhile, the Presidential Communications Operations Office extended its condolences to the families of the victims. PCOO Secretary Martin Andanar said the agency is saddened by the fate of the 7 soldiers. Andanar also extended thoughts and prayers to their families. For the PNA Newsroom, I'm Marita Muahe.
More information dissemination campaigns from the government are underway. PCAO Secretary Martin Andanar reiterates his commitment to keep Filipinos informed, especially during the pandemic. Secretary Andanar assured that PCAO will continue to give priority to its Laging Handa information and communications campaign, which has been proven vital in collating facts and addressing the information gaps. He said part of the campaign is also disseminating and reiterating the need to observe health protocols and precautionary measures, dispelling false information, advocating for preparedness and vigilance, and harnessing solidarity through participatory governance. He said the agency will also continue producing more short films and documentaries depicting how Filipinos and frontline workers have adapted to this new normal. Andanar also bared plans to establish more government media facilities that would allow public information officers from local and national government to be more equipped in addressing information gaps in the respective communities. Newly hired and returning overseas Filipino workers can now revalidate their expired overseas employment certificates, or OEC, at the airport before leaving the country. The OEC is a document certifying the regularity of recruitment and documentation of an OFW. It is also known as an exit clearance. The Philippine Overseas Employment Administration, or POEA, has placed their labor assistance center at different international airports in the country to better assist OFWs on their requirement. Filipinos bound abroad will be asked to submit an original copy of expired overseas employment certificate, a copy of employment contract, a copy of valid work permit or visa, and a valid passport. Now for news, China and the ASEAN mark this year the 30th anniversary of the dialogue relations between the two trading partners. Joint steps by China and ASEAN member states to build a community with a shared future are opening a new chapter toward China-ASEAN common prosperity. Chinese State Councilor and Foreign Minister Wang Yi cited the conclusion of a 6-day Southeast Asia visit, which took him to Myanmar, Indonesia, Brunei, and the Philippines. During the trip, China and ASEAN have reached consensus on stronger cooperation in a range of areas including COVID-19 vaccines, economic recovery, and regional stability. Wang said the East Asia region has set an example for the global fight against the COVID-19 pandemic. China has also been working with relevant ASEAN countries to speed up the construction of major projects. Wang said China-ASEAN relations are the most dynamic and fruitful and have become an important pillar for regional peace and stability, development, and prosperity. In business, the Philippines and China signed on Saturday an agreement that will provide the country with a grant of about 3.72 billion pesos to support the development initiatives of the Duterte administration. The grant is intended to support livelihood projects, infrastructure facilities, feasibility studies from major projects, and other projects. Finance Undersecretary Mark Dennis Joven signed the agreement on behalf of the Philippines, while Vice Chairman Deng Boking of the China International Development Cooperation Agency signed on behalf of the Chinese government. Among the projects being supported or funded by China are the construction of bridges along the Pasig-Marikina rivers connecting Binondo Intramuros, Estrella Pantaleon, and along the Davao River, the reconstruction of Marawi City, and the procurement of container inspection equipment of the Bureau of Customs. President Duterte expressed confidence that the strengthened health cooperation between the Philippines and China would hasten the two nations' economic recovery. President Duterte called on the government to revive economic activities between the Philippines and China as he cited China's role in reviving the region's economy. He also stressed the need to bolster cooperation on public health, particularly on access to safe and effective vaccines against COVID-19. President Duterte made the remarks during his meeting with Chinese State Councilor and Minister of Foreign Affairs Wang Yi at Malacanang Palace on Saturday. Wang announced during the meeting that China will donate 500,000 doses of COVID-19 vaccine to the Philippines. COVID-19 vaccines from Chinese developer Sinovac are set to arrive in the Philippines on February 20. Up next, The Armed Forces of the Philippines vows to dismantle all communist front within the year. And millions of trees will be planted in Cagayan Valley with the help of their diocese. The PNA Newsroom returns after these reminders.
Tandaan ang tamang paraan ng paghuhugas at paglilinis ng kamay upang makaiwas sa iba't ibang karamdaman. Basain ng tubig ang mga kamay at sabunin. Unang sabunin ang mga palad at ang likod ng mga kamay. Kuskusin na maigi ang pagitan ng mga daliri at maging ang mga kuko. Isunod ang pagitan ng mga hinlalaki at kuskusin ng paikot ang mga dulo ng mga daliri sa magkabilang palad. Banlawang mabuti ang mga kamay sa malinis na tubig at patuyuin ang mga kamay gamit ang single-use towel o air dryer. Basta't sama-sama at laging handa, kaya natin to! Isang paalala mula sa DOH, PCOO, KBP at ng himpilang ito. Alamin ang tamang paraan ng pag-ubo upang mapigilan ang paglaganap ng Coronavirus Disease 2019. Ugaliing magdala ng panyo o tissue. Kung uubo o babahing, takpan ang buong ilong at bibig gamit ang panyo o tissue. Kung walang dalang panyo o tissue, maaaring gamitin ang braso na pantakip. Kung nakararamdam na kailangan umubo o bumahing, agad na dumistansya sa mga tao sa paligid. Huwag dumura kung saan-saan, gumamit ng tissue at itapon sa basurahan. Ugaliin ang paghuhugas ng kamay at paggamit ng alcohol o hand sanitizer upang mamatay ang mikrobyo. Basta't sama-sama at laging handa, kaya natin to! Isang paalala mula sa DOH, PCOO, KBP at ng himpilang ito.
The Armed Forces of the Philippines called on all military units to intensify their coordination with the Commission on Human Rights to document human rights abuses conducted by the New People's Army. AFP Chief of Staff General Gilbert Gapay urged all units to raise all violations of human rights and humanitarian law to organizations that protect non-combatants. The AFP earlier sought the assistance of the CHR to investigate over 500 incidents of attacks on civilians and their properties by the communist terrorist group since 2010. The same report was also submitted to the UN through the Office of the High Commissioner on Human Rights and the UN Resident and Humanitarian Coordinator in the Philippines. Last year, the AFP also submitted a report to the UN and CHR detailing a list of child warriors employed by the communist terrorist group. AFP Chief of Staff General Gilbert Gapay has ordered all his commanders to totally dismantle all remaining NPA guerrilla fronts as the communist terrorists have been seriously weakened by government offensives. Gapay expects all remaining communist guerrilla fronts to be simultaneously addressed and defeated toward the end of 2021. A total of 54 so-called guerrilla fronts remain, with 9 other regional armed groups which were already decimated and on the brink of collapse. This came after the successful dismantling of 22 communist fighting and propaganda units. Meanwhile, in territorial defense, Gapay said the Philippines' integrity remains secured and the country's strategic resources and critical infrastructures are protected. He called for innovative ways in asserting sovereignty over the country's territorial claims and exercising sovereign rights in the West Philippine Sea. Another suspected member of the CPP-NPA facing murder and frustrated murder charges was arrested in Toboso, Negros Occidental on January 14. The suspect was identified as Alberto Berting Pandacan, a cadre of the NPA Northern Negros Front Comiteng Region Negros. He was arrested by Army and police personnel in Sitio Seraje, Barangay San Isidro, Toboso. The suspect was linked to an ambush of civilians at Sitio Toril, Barangay Salamanca on July 13, 2009 that killed 3 persons and injured 3 others. Meanwhile, at least 20 families have evacuated to safer ground as government troops clashed for the second day with the NPA in Barangay Trinidad in Gihulngan City, Negros Oriental. The families from Sitio Batong Buang in Barangay Trinidad have been attended to by the Gihulngan City Task Force to end local communist armed conflict. On Saturday afternoon, troops of the 62nd Infantry Battalion encountered an undetermined number of suspected rebels in the sitio. Trinidad is one of the barangays included in the TF-LCAC's priority areas under the whole-of-nation approach in ending local communist armed conflict. In sports, the framework for a new National Sports Association for volleyball has been placed as volleyball stakeholders convened ahead of the elections set later this month. The general election for the new NSA is scheduled on January 25 at the East Ocean Palace restaurant in Parañaque. The attendees agreed that 13 people will form the inaugural executive board of the new NSA. 12 seats will be reportedly divided equally among members of the LARONG Volleyball sa Pilipinas, Philippine Volleyball Federation, and a coalition led by the Alliances of Philippine Volleyball. The 13th volleyball board member will come from the Philippine Olympic Committee. The volleyball groups have until Monday to submit who will vote on their behalf. The nomination of candidates, on the other hand, is set Wednesday. Dioceses in Cagayan Valley are looking to plant more than 1 million trees in 500 days. The initiative, dubbed as Mission 500, aims to plant 500 trees a day in the Archdiocese of Tuguegarao, the Diocese of Ilagan and Bayombong, the Vicariate of Tabuk, and the Prelature of Batanes. The Catholic Bishops' Conference of the Philippines, or CBCP, says the program's target is to plant at least 1.25 million trees by early next year. The project also aims to celebrate this year's 500th anniversary of the arrival of Christianity in the Philippines. Bayombong Bishop Elmer Mangalinaw said the flooding that affected thousands of families in November last year shows the urgency to protect their homes. Also launched was the Metropolitan Ecology Desk and the Eco-Convergence Luzon Hub in partnership with Caritas Philippines. Heavy rains brought floods for the third straight weekend in Negros Occidental, with San Carlos City being the hardest hit on Saturday night. As of Sunday afternoon, 111 families were in various evacuation centers. Mayor Renato Agustilo said the City Disaster Risk Reduction and Management Office immediately deployed responders, while the San Carlos City Police Station also assisted in the rescue operations. Floods were reported in several villages such as Barangays 1, 2, 5, 6, and Rizal. The City Environment Management Office said the rain swept debris to the city's waterways, which could have caused the flooding. On January 1 and 8, flash floods also hit a large portion of northern Negros. Among the hardest hit were the cities of Silay, Talisay and Victorias, and EB Magalona Town, which were all placed under a state of calamity. Take one more look at today's biggest stories. The Health Department says it is seeking further study on the deaths in Norway linked to COVID-19 vaccine. The government maintains it is buying Sinovac at a fair price. The crash site of the Philippine Air Force chopper remains restricted, and the AFP vows to dismantle all communist front within the year. Thank you for watching another episode of the PNA Newsroom. To check more news content, check our webpage or check the Philippine News Agency's Facebook and Twitter accounts. For more stories about the government, how it serves Filipinos, look for these hashtags in all our social media platforms and websites. We are shown on the pages of the PCOO and its attached agencies. Also watch us on television on PTV4 and IBC 13. And that's the biggest stories that you need to know from PNA Newsroom. We tell stories that inspire change. I am Rom Dulfo. Have a good day.